Good morning, rise and shine, or rising and shine, I guess.
That's a good, let's change the name.
I've never said that, I don't think, not once in 5 years.
I'm bringing out the best in you, the sunshine and rainbows.
Yes, you are. Well, I'm glad to see you in such a positive mood. I know you had a harrowing journey back to our fair city.
It was a disaster. I'm just getting acclimated to D.C. and you missed one Amtrak. Acela Express cost $1 million.
She drove here from New York in the middle of the night.
I just drove in the middle of the night.
That's crazy.
It was ridiculous. But thank you to the Avis team that allowed me to get a car the same day in the middle of Manhattan.
So, glad you made it.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm delirious. Coming up on Rising, California Governor Gavin Newsom is taking action against masked ICE agents, but will the new bill be enforceable?
And plus, Governor Josh Shapiro is taking a jab at former President Kamala Harris.
And I'll be
Vice President, excuse me, not the President.
Yeah, and I'll be discussing how the right seems to be betraying their free speech principles when it comes to Jimmy Kimmel. But first, Robby, what is on your radar today?
Oh, I have a similar subject that I'm addressing. Now, according to the latest news, as you just announced, Lindsay, Jimmy Kimmel is negotiating a return to late night after being yanked off the airwaves following his deplorable comments implying that Tyler Robinson, the alleged murderer of Charlie Kirk, was actually part of the MAGA gang. Of course, everything we've learned about Robinson suggests he was not himself part of MAGA. Rather, he allegedly killed Kirk because Kirk was MAGA. Kimmel should not have implied otherwise. He's not alone, of course. Incorrect notions about the suspect's political tribe have remained enduringly popular in liberal media circles. One of the top mainstream liberal Substack writers, Heather Cox Richardson, wrote last week that the motive of the alleged shooter remains unclear. This is simply not true. Interviews with Robinson's friends, family members, as well as text messages between Robinson and his roommate, his transgender romantic partner, paint a clear portrait of a man who found Kirk's conservative views harmful. Now, while Kimmel is a comedian rather than a newscaster, given how paranoid the mainstream media is about the spread of so-called misinformation, the criticism of Kimmel on this subject was well-deserved. And private businesses, private media companies, well, they're allowed to make decisions about their own programming and decide they don't want to employ, broadcast, or platform someone they disagree with, or someone who's losing money because the audience doesn't like it. Free speech means freedom from government coercion. It does not mean freedom to say whatever you want on somebody else's dime. And so the decision to suspend Kimmel was made by ABC after Nexstar Media and Sinclair Broadcast Group decided not to air him on their local stations. In the interest of full disclosure, Nexstar is the parent company of The Hill, program you're watching. But here's the bigger issue. Again, it's fine to take Kimmel off the air. It's just not okay for the government to take Kimmel off the air. Unfortunately, the Federal Communications Commission, very unwisely in my view, decided to insert itself in this matter. Brendan Carr is chair of the FCC. Not only did he criticize what Kimmel had to say, he also implicitly pressured the broadcasters. Take a look what he said during an interview with conservative influencer Benny Johnson.
But frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC. Again, there's actions that we can take on licensed broadcasters. And frankly, I think that it's really sort of past time that a lot of these licensed broadcasters themselves push back.
We can do this the easy way or the hard way. It's not an idle threat. The FCC licenses broadcast channels and can fine them or even take them off the air. The FCC can make life very difficult for companies that defy it. So I'll say it once again. Private companies have the right to determine their programming as they see fit. And a washed-up comedian telling lame jokes about a subject he is clearly misinformed on for a declining number of viewers as part of a media format that is antiquated and perpetually losing money is not a recipe for riveting television, in my humble opinion. Letting Kimmel and the rest of the late-night crowd go extinct is perfectly fine. It's a business decision. But it is not the FCC's decision. As Glenn Greenwald put it, I couldn't have said it better myself, this shouldn't be a complicated or difficult dichotomy to understand. Jimmy Kimmel is repulsive, but the state has no role in threatening companies to fire on-air voices it dislikes or who the state believes is spreading disinformation, which is exactly what happened here. Moreover, the Trump administration's actions are functionally equivalent to the Biden administration's attacks on private social media companies, which caused numerous free speech infringements during the COVID-19 pandemic. Recall that President Biden, who accused Facebook of killing people when it declined to censor anti-vaccine content, as well as his comm staffers, were likely motivating factors behind a whole host of regrettable moderation decisions made by Facebook at the behest of the White House, the CDC, and other government agencies. when federal employees use the threat of regulation, fines, and other forms of punishment to induce private companies into self-censorship. It's known as jawboning. That's the term. Now, whether this practice violates the First Amendment, which constrains the government's ability to restrict speech, that's not entirely a settled matter. In Murphy v. Missouri, the Supreme Court declined to rule that the Biden administration had violated the First Amendment rights of social media users. The case is also known as Missouri v. Biden. The majority decision, however, had to do with standing and did not actually address the arguments of the plaintiffs. Many free speech scholars rightly believe that the First Amendment rights of private media companies and their users will not be protected until and unless the court makes clear that this sort of behavior from federal bureaucrats, jawboning, is wrong. Ironically, FCC Chair Carr has strongly denounced jawboning in the past and in general been a strong supporter of the First Amendment rights. He frequently called out the Biden administration for engaging in this very practice, writing in August of 2022, "This is very concerning. The government does not evade the First Amendment's restraints on censoring political speech by jawboning a company into suppressing it. Rather, that conduct runs headlong into those constitutional restrictions, as Supreme Court law makes clear." There's simply no way to square this circle. If it's wrong for the Biden administration to pressure social media companies to serve the public interest as defined by Biden and censor fraud content, then it's wrong for the Trump administration to pressure broadcasters to enforce a Trump-defined public interest. Don't just take my word for it. Senator Rand Paul and Senator Ted Cruz, they both agree with me. Cruz said the FCC's actions here were dangerous as hell. That's a direct quote from him. That all conservatives should oppose the FCC trying to pressure companies to make editorial decisions of this kind. And Paul said the following.
You can be fired for not being popular also. I mean, this is television, for goodness sakes. You have to sell sponsorships. You have to sell commercials. And if you're losing money, you can be fired. But the government's got no business in it, and the FCC was wrong to weigh in, and I'll fight any attempt by the government to get involved with speech. I will fight.
Good for them. Cruz and Paul are exactly right on this. I totally agree with them.
I'm glad I'm doing my lens on this because I have a lot to say, but I will respond to some of what you said. I think what the Trump administration is doing, it's like they're trying to just get rid of anybody that doesn't conform to the political speech that aligns with them. And it was even interesting and a step further that President Trump just last week started threatening to possibly revoke the licenses of broadcasters that say too many bad things. And I'm paraphrasing, but you know what he said, like, if you guys have seen him speaking about this, he was like, there's so much negativity about me. We need to revoke these licenses. And I think he's misunderstanding and misusing and often even considering abusing the government in ways, like you said, if private companies don't agree with it, that's fine. But the president should not be inserting himself on whether he's covered unfairly or not. Also, part of that coverage, which conservatives have complained about, bred a slew of conservative outlets that should be amazing for people that felt like there was lack of a voice to level the playing field. I mean, even Reason, where you work, Newsmax popped up in recent years. I mean, we're having multiple different outlets to provide.
Well, Democrats have tried to throttle all those. So that's
but they're here.
The blowback
they're
here is conservatives say, well, but Democrats try to get Newsmax taken off the air. They try to get Fox taken off the air.
And also with the FCC, I think it's just wholly wrong. So if you understand what the FCC is governing, they're looking at things like, are you running commercials to children? That's against the FCC rules. Is there indecency in the programming?
Right.
That's against the FCC rules. So no matter what you think about what Jimmy Kimmel
You and I
said,
had to familiarize ourselves with
I had
the
to
rules
read through all of it.
We're on
yes, we went to an actual seminar about it. But
we were given bars of soap and told to scrub out our mouths.
And we're also under a news division now. So we have to try to be accurate or attribute what we're saying. But with Jimmy Kimmel, people don't understand that he's under the entertainment division at ABC. So it's important to understand the differences between that. And even though he reports a lot of the news through his purview, he's still under the entertainment division. Right. So that's an important distinction.
He should be accountable to his viewers, accountable to the market. He's accountable to his bosses, to the network. The FCC needed not say anything about this matter. I wish they hadn't. Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. It is a marvelous Tuesday morning in the District of Columbia, and I think red is your best color, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say we look like an American flag right now.
We do.
Look at us, so patriotic.
Jinx.
Well, coming up on Rising, I'll be discussing a little bit in my lens about how some CEOs are actually not happy with Trump's business policies.
Also, CNN commentator Scott Jennings, the man, he's referring Keith Olbermann, who's not the man, to the FBI.
And multiple major countries are recognizing a Palestinian state. But first, of course, Robby, what is on your radar?
Well, he's back. That's fast. Jimmy Kimmel is returning to your televisions tonight, or some of your televisions at least, after what will ultimately have been a suspension of less than a week. Disney said in a statement, "Last Wednesday we made the decision to suspend production on the show to avoid further inflaming a tense situation and an emotional moment for our country. It's a decision we made because we felt some of the comments were ill-timed and thus insensitive. We've spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy, and after those conversations, we reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday." One wonders whether Kimmel will suitably address the misinformation that he spread about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I don't think he has any plans to. Democrats, liberals, and the mainstream media, after all, love to pretend that we have this big information problem in our country. It's all the fault of you, those Republicans who spread conspiracy theories and junk science and lies on social media. We're told the progressive Democrats, on the other hand, well, they're honest people who trust what the experts say, and they form conclusions based on reason and logic, not like that pro-Trump MAGA cult. No, no, no. That's why I'm always amused when we are presented with a high-profile example of a liberal Democratic commentator gleefully asserting something that is flat out wrong, as Kimmel did last week on his late-night show. Kimmel said the MAGA gang was trying desperately to deny that the 22-year-old Utah man, Tyler Robinson, who allegedly assassinated Charlie Kirk, was not one of them. In other words, he falsely implied the killer was right-wing or was motivated by a right-wing dislike of Charlie Kirk. We know now that that's not true. The suspect's family and friends described him as increasingly left-leaning, particularly on issues of gender. Robinson was living with and reportedly dating a male roommate who was transitioning to a woman. Robinson himself said of Kirk, "I've had enough of this hatred." So if you think Charlie Kirk, one of the best-known conservative speakers in the country, was too hateful and thus deserved to die, you are left-leaning almost by definition. But we already know this. Here's what I wanted to mention today. It's not just Kimmel who misinformed his audience by promoting this falsehood about the shooter. A huge chunk of self-identified Democrats also believe the lie. That's according to polling from YouGov, which found that Democrats were more likely to believe that right-wing views had motivated the shooter than left-wing views. 10% of Democratic respondents thought the killer was left-wing. 33% thought he was right-wing, 20% thought he was motivated by something other than politics, and 37% said they weren't sure. Now, to be fair, not sure is, I guess, a perfectly valid response, and something other than politics is probably incorrect, but I guess not explicitly disproven. But 10% of them said the shooter was left-wing, and just 33% said he was right-wing. That's a healthy dose of misinformation. Hat tip to my friend Ben Domenech, who noticed this poll and called it to my attention. Now, I don't think it's some catastrophic crisis when a large chunk of the populace is misinformed about something, but Democrats certainly do. Remember all the efforts during the Biden administration and during the COVID pandemic and during the debunked Russiagate hoax to say that misinformation on social media was a cataclysmic problem necessitating government involvement? Remember when prominent right-wing dissenters were labeled disinfo superspreaders? Remember when conservative news sites were secretly blacklisted at the behest of state-funded disinformation research groups? Those efforts were pushed by Democrats and by Democratic administrations. Now the shoe's on the other foot, and liberals really mad that Kimmel is facing the kind of consequences for spreading misinformation that they themselves advocated. They reaped, and now they sow. Of course, the best thing to do now would be to mutually stand down, to reassert basic free speech norms, and promise not to purge dissenting or even incorrect opinions from the internet. Because it's not just Republicans or Democrats who have them. Everybody is wrong about something. Just check these polls. We'll be watching to see if Kimmel addresses his error, his misinformation, on the show tonight.
I'm so excited that you'll be watching Kimmel tonight. I'm so excited that you'll be watching Kimmel with me. We should text and have like a screening. My first thing was that the answer to most questions is money. And so I know you don't like Kimmel. You think he doesn't make money. But I think they said ABC almost lost $4 billion in stocks, people trading their stocks off, and also with people canceling their subscriptions, Hulu, all the people under the umbrella. So
boycott fewer.
So
now liberals are getting in on the boycott game.
Well, I'm just saying that the money, people want to see Kimmel. So that's the audience spoke up directly, and they made a decision, and they said, oh, we had time to talk about it, fine. But you also lost money. Let's just be honest. This is business. But I also think when you look at those polls, like you're expecting, and you also were expecting Jimmy Kimmel to understand all that we know now that there's been a full press conference, that Kash Patel has released details and documentation saying that this is definitively connected to a relationship and things that he wrote. He wasn't being cooperative at the time that Jimmy Kimmel spoke and did his monologue, so he wasn't misspeaking information intentionally. He didn't have the information that we have
Jimmy
now.
Kimmel?
Or the next day. Yes, the next day is when we had that press conference.
No, it was already by then.
No, it was already decided by Republicans, is what I'm saying. From day one, it was decided this was a left-leaning attack, the radical left. Like President Trump said, the radical left causes tremendous violence. But I actually wanted to make sure, because I've been seeing this conversation happen way too often to make me comfortable. So I want to be sure that we're factual. And PBS did a report last night and looked into this independent research on their own. They also looked into the Anti-Defamation League research. They also looked into the U.S. Government of Accountability stats to see who is committing this violence. And they said they can confidently say that most domestic terrorists happen to be more right-leaning. Yet still, I don't try to paint an entire party for being responsible for any of those actions. They said approximately 75 to 80% of U.S. domestic terrorism deaths since 2001 are actually right-leaning.
You know why it's since 2001?
Why since 2001? Break it down.
They start counting on September 12th.
Okay, but why is that a left-leaning? Well, why would September 11th be?
Then we're not counting. That doesn't count as left or right.
Okay,
it goes in a separate category of Islamic terrorism, which dwarfs the other two. If you're counting 9/11, if you're not counting it, there is more. But what they do with these statistics. So most of the extremist violence, or the people they're labeling extremists, are white supremacist prison gangs, and most of these violent incidents are them shanking someone else, for lack of a better word, or murdering a spouse or a loved one who they think is informing on them. It is not the actual violence is not politically connected. It is being perpetrated by extremely violent, nasty, awful people who should
As much as you say that the
prison.
entire Democratic Party must be the party of transgender, whatever that means for you. It's like saying, as much as the Republican Party. No, I'm saying these, like people saying that it's left-leaning violence because he was defending the honor of his transgender loved one. Mm-hmm. Why does that have to do with left-leaning? He's defending the honor of his transgender loved one. People are trying to connect those dots. So then let's also connect the dots of white supremacy to the far fringes of the right. You don't see like the far fringes of the left connecting the Great Replacement theory to what they're arguing for.
I didn't mean that in an insulting way. I'm sure you do understand the difference between like white supremacists or people who join white supremacist gangs when they're in prison. These are violent people, and violence being committed for reasons that align with that ideology.
But there's also,
you see what I'm saying?
But even if we go past, like, let's say 2001, in 1995, Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma State bombing
politically motivated right-wing violence.
All right, so like let's just, everyone wants to pretend. Like,
no, I'm not pretending. That's
clearer than this.
Definition.
That is clearer than this instance where you're saying that he was protecting the honor of his loved one and killed Charlie Kirk and he was wrong and a criminal. Again, why does that make him left-wing? I want somebody to really paint the picture to me. Just because he was a transgender man, his whole entire family, he was raised, Jimmy Kimmel had a point. He was raised under a MAGA-supporting family and a young man in college. I know that when I was in college, I was just self-identifying. That's an opportunity to 4 years to grow into who you are. It's the young person that has lived under a Republican household
said what he disliked
his whole life.
About
He's
Charlie
not
Kirk
cooperating.
Was the hatefulness. And we can tie it to this issue.
You can tie it because you're trying to tie it, but it doesn't mean that he was left-wing. It could mean that he was just defending the honor of his loved one. And so Jimmy Kimmel really, we'll see what he does tonight, but why does he have to explain himself for thinking what the rest of the country was thinking? If most of these crimes are generally right-wing, I'm thinking this is the same thing.
The only thing I agree with you is that a lot of the rest of the country was thinking that, but it's incorrect. Good morning and welcome to Rising. We are already having so much fun here. Lindsay got caught in the rain. You had a harrowing journey.
Is DC usually this rainy?
No, it's not particularly rainy.
I'm not a huge fan of this torrential downpour. Since April, I've been coming back and forth, and I feel like it's rained probably like half of the time.
There was a lot of rain this summer, yeah.
Yeah, I'm over it.
Well,
I skip to winter. I'm a December baby.
No, I don't like the cold.
Oh,
but,
come on, just come on.
Well, I'm in a good mood anyway because I'm feeling better, and I'm excited to get to today's show.
Yep.
Fascinating topics, including something very near and dear to my heart.
I know. When you combine these two topics, I knew you were going to go off. So, Robby, what's on your radar?
All right. Here we go. Google admitted earlier this week that its COVID-era censorship policies were enacted at the explicit behest of the Biden administration. Well. And the company now says it will allow any content creator that was silenced for this reason to return to YouTube, which is a massive win for free speech, as well as an acknowledgement that those of us who objected to the government bullying the tech companies were right all along. This new policy was announced in response to an inquiry by House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, who asked Google for information about moderation decisions the company made during the Biden years. In response, Alphabet, the parent company of Google, said in a statement that, quote, senior Biden administration officials, including White House officials, conducted repeated and sustained outreach to Alphabet and pressed the company regarding certain user-generated content related to the COVID-19 pandemic that did not violate its policies. While the company continued to develop and enforce its policies independently, Biden administration officials continued to press the company to remove non-violative user-generated content, end quote. Alphabet's statement goes on to accuse the Biden administration of creating a, quote, political atmosphere that sought to influence the actions of platforms based on their concerns regarding misinformation. Alphabet also notes that it has already revised its election integrity policies, which had also led to the removal of content from YouTube. With this similar admission about the harms caused by the COVID policy, YouTube is now welcoming all creators terminated under the policies back to the platform. Come on in, the water's fine. Now, lest you think that means a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists, that's who's coming back, right? That's anybody who got kicked off. Well, consider this. Now, longtime viewers probably remember, but this channel, what you're watching right now, The Hill, was previously suspended for a week for allegedly breaking a rule that YouTube now admits was wrong. What am I talking about? Well, in March 2022, we were informed that we had violated an election integrity policy by posting allegedly false information about the 2020 election, because we'd played video footage on the show, this show, of Trump saying that the election was stolen. We didn't say the election was stolen. We didn't endorse that view. We just reported the fact that Trump had said it. Think how crazy that is. Under YouTube's previous policy, they couldn't distinguish, or were unwilling to distinguish, between Trump saying something and a news channel reporting that he had said something. Here was me and my co-hosts at the time, Ryan Grimm and Kim Iverson, talking about what had happened to us after we served our 1-week stint in timeout.
So last week, if you haven't read Robby's piece or my piece, we committed 2 crimes. One crime was posting video.
I think it was 3 crimes. I think it was 3. I think it was 3 because it was last year.
Oh, there was a crime a year ago.
Right.
Yeah, and then doing it again this year.
They posted a Trump video.
And contrary to what our audience might have expected, it was not Kim's fault.
Yeah, believe it or not. I wasn't actually even involved
weren't in the offending segment.
The video that ended up finally being like the nail in the coffin. It was you two. I leave you two alone for a minute.
It was Emily Jashinsky.
Man, what a blast from the past. Some fun times with those folks. Now, more than 3 years later, I actually don't blame YouTube as much for this kind of thing, even though it was wrong and crazy, because we now know that this platform, as well as Twitter X, Facebook, all the rest, faced relentless pressure to censor speech that dissented from the perspective of the Biden administration. We didn't know it then, particularly on the subject of COVID and the 2020 election. It was censorship. It was jawboning, the term we use to describe government figures trying to push companies to take some action. And it was wrong. Now, of course, many in the mainstream media are suddenly very, very worried about jawboning. They are extremely concerned about what the Trump administration is doing in terms of pressuring private media companies to do exactly what the Biden administration did. Here was Jake Tapper, for instance, reacting to Jimmy Kimmel getting temporarily taken off the air.
All right, Jimmy Kimmel, he's a friend of both of ours.
Yeah.
You know him, I know him. We know he's a good person. Obviously, this news is very exciting. But what was your original take on how this all went down starting last week?
I mean, I thought it was pretty much the most direct infringement by the government on free speech that I've seen in my lifetime.
Now, to be clear, I do agree that jawboning is a bad problem. I've been saying it for years. I do think the FCC should have just totally stayed out of the Kimmel issue. But let's not pretend this is the first time that this has ever happened. Thanks to pressure from the federal government when it was run by Democrats, social media giants engaged in vast censorship of you and of me. The shoe's on the other foot now, and that is wrong. But maybe more mainstream liberals should have taken notice when it was happening to us. I love the little stroll down memory lane. You can see that our set was completely different. Everything was totally different.
But it looks like a fun show with 3 people.
We had a lot of fun. So that was not usually the setup. Kim would do it remotely from California, where she lived. But for that week, she was in town to visit. And actually, she
a special week when you got deleted
planned
from
to
air.
come for the week, and then like she was ready to board the flight or something, and they were like, "We're actually going to be off for the next week." She was like, "Well, never mind. I'll come the week after."
Oh my gosh. Okay,
fun times.
that's pretty crazy. intensely on the flight or going to the flight. So I will say, I'm not even going to lie. Like, I was reading your radar earlier, and I'm like, you know what? You're right, right? This is
crazy.
It is. For you guys to get cut off air for a soundbite is not right. I do believe that social media is the wild, wild west. We understand that the FCC and its rules apply directly to broadcast channels in a different way than YouTube is monitored, or even cable or other ways that people get news. So I just think it's important to understand what's allowed, like, and what's not allowed according to these rules. Like perjury in court, we should always say that that's wrong and that's against the law, right? There's certain things that are not freedom of speech that are written down, but I think we have to follow it to the textbooks, and you can't be a hypocrite on either side. I call for the same thing from Republicans, to not have been campaigning against cancel culture and then do this the same way Democrats in the weeds. I didn't know it went as far as to take the hill off the air. That's extreme. But I do think,
again, the difference between the speaker and the platform.
So I would
is
just say,
not
but
being
the only reason
recognized.
why I have a little bit of hesitancy, and I don't want to like say like, oh, caveat for what I think is right, but when you talk about COVID, we were in a pandemic of, once in a lifetime, where people were so jarred by information and so overwhelmed that it could lead to mass panic, which is also really problematic for leadership in any country. And so when people are spreading misinformation, and mind you, the CDC got it wrong. We agree on that plenty of times. But when people are just spreading any information, there was a little bit of a need to know, like, who is just taking something they read in a blog and who is actually telling you facts. And some people consume social media in a way that if somebody looks like they're an authority figure, then they're automatically right. And that just could be putting up a podcast set in your house. And people just take it as law. And then with the election, we saw that it actually caused, that sentiment caused people to revolt and try to, go into our Capitol and storm it.
Response to that,
so I just think that we have to be mindful of things that might directly incite mass chaos.
But I don't think, I think the attempts to suppress those sentiments can actually make them be held more powerfully and strongly by people, because you actually can't stop them from hearing about it. I mean, this was with the Hunter Biden New York Post story, right? It got taken off social media at the encouragement of law enforcement because they said this is a false story, don't listen to it. So they could suppress that story, but they couldn't suppress all the stories about this story being suppressed. So you call more attention to it. I think that's a lesson to Trump, honestly, as he goes forward with some of this Kimmel stuff and some of the, attacking New York Times, attacking the Wall Street Journal over the Epstein birthday card.
Right.
More people have heard about it because now you hear about the lawsuit. You can try to suppress the thing, but you actually call more attention to it. And that's why I think some of these efforts were misguided.
And I think when you back up and look at what Trump's doing and things that you named, also who's in position at certain companies, like his former ambassador now at CBS, or all his friends running most social media companies, Elon Musk, people that are cozy up to him, Mark Zuckerberg. These are all people that have sit next to him and like, okay, I'm going to say whatever you want now because I'm your friend. This causes, to me, an eyebrow raise, and everyone should be raising their eyebrows, because it's not just free and uncensored. If Elon Musk is programming Grok to say things that lean conservative.
Well, yeah, he owns Grok, so he can do that.
Right,
That's different than, I don't want him having to program Grok because he thinks whoever the legislators or the FCC or the president is going to break up the company or regulate the company because Grok is not programmed to the president's specifications. That's the harm.
I think we're going to talk about this a lot more with all the censorship coming from your party or your friends.
Not my party.